it's going to be called Intentional Faith, and he's really concerned about the Z and Alpha generation that's been kind of sidestepped in their faith in the last 20 years by other things. And he really is trying to step into the arena and speak truth and know he's a 22-year-old himself. So he's in that generation. His education, he watched it happen to his friends and peers. And
Yeah.
Real stories and fresh wisdom on the front porch. Join us with today's guest.
life has got to be lived. And
Yep.
I think a lot of wisdom, actually, the concept of wisdom, when we may get into this, it comes by hard knocks in life. You don't, I've got a 22-year-old starting the nonprofit, and he's very intelligent, but he's still working on wisdom.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and about 40, he'll start thinking, oh, that was a stupid decision. But right now it's knowledge which leads to understanding, but their wisdom is lacking. So there's a lot of that in the world. And sometimes 50-year-olds are still gaining knowledge and understanding and still don't have much wisdom. So
That's true. And then you have the old souls who have wisdom beyond their years. And it's like, how do they get that? It's interesting how life is. So
yeah,
let's just get right into it. Is that okay?
let's do it. I'm ready to, Ellis, anytime you're ready, I'm ready. So fire away.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Wisdom on the Front Porch. And on my front porch today is Larry. And I'm so glad he's here. He's got great wisdom himself. Plus, he has a book out. And I believe that's it behind you, Intentional Living and Giving. Is that it?
Well, that's the book. Yes, I put it up there to remind myself of what I'm living for.
There you go. What are you living for, Larry?
What's that?
What are you living for?
Well, I was, it might give you a little bit of context of my history. I'm a post-World War II kid. I came into the being right when the war was over, and I was raised in Western Colorado, which was urban but more rural community. My father was a church planter, and he had a business on the side, so he was a tent maker in the sense. He had an outdoor advertising agency, and I worked my way through life by painting outdoor advertising signs along freeways and maintaining them. So
Wow.
I lived on the real part of the world, and I never knew why we were doing all this, except I was given an assignment and go take care of it. So, but my background came in that world there. I went to the University of Colorado, and my whole goal in life for about 5 years when I got there was to get into theater. I loved the craft. I'd spent all my high school years and my first 2 years of college. I just knew I was going to end up either on the East Coast in New York or the West Coast in Hollywood because I love the craft.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. My junior year in college, I was in a class one day of these students. There was about 20 of us. And it really struck me as I watched the students talk that everybody was living a life on stage and they were in a classroom. They were all behind a mask, and they learned the craft well enough that I never knew who they really were. And I started thinking, life is not behind a character. And I love playing characters, but characters were to be played for 1 or 2 hours, and then you left the character behind and you became yourself. Well, when you got caught up in this theater crafting stuff, pretty soon everything was being played as if you were on stage. And I thought, this is really empty. What am I doing here as a junior in college, thinking that I'm going to spend the rest of my life acting like I wasn't myself and performing for somebody else? Now, I didn't have a clear answer. My background, because my father was into church planting, I have a strong religious background and faith, but it was much more religion. I was watching people perform, trying to reach God. And I saw the hypocrisy. I saw arguments. I mean, life was just messy, and church was messy to me. But my interest in the theater got me into being a character that I could play when I had to be a good preacher's kid outside. I could be whatever I wanted when I put on the other character. But it was kind of an empty thought there at the university. All of a sudden, I thought, what am I doing here? Where am I going? is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? And I had not been to church for a few weeks, and because I was becoming liberated from all of that stuff. And I thought that next Sunday, I'm going to go find a place and see if I can find some friends, because that were real that were real. That was really the issue. And I went to this particular church that Sunday morning, drove in. I was all by myself. I never knew anybody. And a guys pulled in next to me. They immediately got out and greeted me. Within 10 minutes, I knew that they weren't wearing masks. They were engineering students that had no interest in theater. And I had no idea what they were doing in engineering. But I could see there was a reality of their lives that just was different than what I'd experienced in a long time. And over the course of a few months, why I started realizing they had a very personal faith relationship. They were not religious in the sense of trying to perform. They just were enjoying life as engineering students. And that really attracted me because they didn't have the mask on. And that was a changing point in my life, because I started to realize that people could actually have faith and not be crazy or not be argumentative or be performing all the time. I think when you look at the world today, no matter what religion you look at, there's a performance that's going on, whether it's praying 5 times a day religiously, whether it's going into a large cathedral and sitting in seats, or whatever the environment is, there is an attempt to reach God in the context of their religious search. And I just discovered that was putting the ladder against the wrong building. And it was not me reaching to figure out what God was, but letting God touch my life. And that really transformed everything I did. So, my life started to change. I wanted to get out of that university theater department. I went and got some counsel, and they said the only way out is to become a secondary school teacher in drama, speech, English, arts, all that stuff. And I said, I'll take it, because I discovered I could still graduate in 4 years. And I stopped all of my theater arts and just focused on education for my last 3 semesters. And luckily graduated as a certified teacher for secondary education in theater arts and all the stuff that could go along with education. But I never taught any more than my student teaching years, because I really was into other things of interest to me. I've used my education, but not the way the University of Colorado thought I was going to use it.
There you go.
So that's a little bit of me, a
That's
Colorado kid that now lives in California. Go right ahead.
Well, that is absolutely fascinating. And it's amazing that when we go to college, we may go in with no idea, or with one idea, this is what I'm going to do. And by the time we get out, everything has changed, because we've matured in that part. We have gained some wisdom in the world, and trying to find what we really want to do. And as far as your grandson starting a nonprofit at 22, I mean, it's good. Like you said, he's got the knowledge to go ahead and start, and he'll gain some wisdom along the way. And yeah, in 10 years, he'll go, man, I wish I would have done this or that different. But, we've learned along the way, and that's what counts. So we have to know, what did you do after college, since it wasn't what you finished college with?
Well, at the University of Colorado, I became very intrigued with what these 2 students were into. And it was a movement on campus. There was probably 125, maybe 200 students involved. And we were out sharing our personal faith with people. We became very, I wouldn't say aggressively in an obnoxious way, but we were very upfront about our faith and what that meant. And at the University of Colorado, you got to keep in mind, in those days, the University of Colorado, while they got a good football team and a good coach this year, at that particular time, we were on probation for payola to athletes. And so it was also known as the party school of the nation. They called it the Harvard of the Rockies. It was a weird place to finish my education, but it was a thriving place in terms of my spiritual growth and figuring out what I was going to do.
Wasn't that something?
What I also discovered, though, Ellis, as I was there were certain things I was good at, and what I was good at in theater was the directing, the creation from scratch. I enjoyed the directing far more than I did the acting because I could help mold the show from paper to a live performance in 8 weeks. And then I got a little bored with the acting part because you work so hard for 5 days of performance and it's all over. But I gravitated to something else, and I realized later on it was leadership skills that I had. It was taking the something from nothing. It was creating a team spirit. It was learning to fail and recognizing that failure is not negative. So in that process, I started to see a few years later, this is who I really am. And I'm a real proponent of an individual utilizing his strengths in life because I believe they were God given. So it's not that I didn't have other skills, but I gravitated to what really let me thrive rather than survive.
Yeah.
And so I began using those. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, good. No, I was going to say, I like what you said about failure. You found out failure is not a negative, and it's not, we learn from it, but yet still as entrepreneurs, we don't like failure. If something goes wrong, we feel like we've not only failed ourselves, we've failed the people that are going to rely on us, the people that we're going to give the information to, or whatever it is that we have as entrepreneurs. And it's hard to not take that in deeply into ourselves because we feel we have a mission, that we have this, whatever this is, for because it's different for each person. Um, and when we don't get that accomplished, it's like, how do we go on? How do we, yes, I learned I should have done this, this, and that. I can do that the next time. But what do I do with this failure now? As much as we don't want to acknowledge it as a failure, I call them challenges, and a lot of them you can just get through, but there's some that it's like, I don't see any other choice but to quit, even though that's really not what we entrepreneurs want to do. But it affects
Well,
us.
I think you're really resonating. I think a lot of people don't try things because they're afraid of failure.
Yes.
I got I had a guy that I reported to in one of a couple of years into my work of in ministry, and he was challenged me. He said, "We got to do this, and this is how we're going to go about doing it." And he was an idea person. He was a visionary. He had great ideas. He had no idea how to make the ideas work. Well, we connected
Been there.
well because, well, the connection was he could come up with the ideas and I could figure out how to turn the idea into reality. And
Oh,
so
nice.
we became a really good partner, literally joining hands tightly because he could take on things and I could make the thing really happen. And I was happy of working in that relationship. I wasn't trying to overpower him. He wasn't trying to overpower me. But there was this one task, and he was telling me what we could do, and we were brainstorming this thing. And I said, I don't know if we could ever pull that off. That's almost overwhelming to me. And I said, I just don't know if we can do that. And he said, Larry, you've always got the freedom to fail. Don't look at failure as something that sets you back. Look at failure as an experience of learning. And he says, if it doesn't quite work, you can tweak, you can analyze, you can go back at it again. And he said, you're concerned about the goal. The goal is only an idea out there. The one that challenged me the most was when he came into me one day. I was putting music groups together, of all things. I had 7 performing music groups in Asia and in Europe, and 5 here in the United States, a total of 7 at the time. And he said, Larry, we got to find 48 music groups to perform in Dallas, Texas within in a week's period of time. We got 8 months to figure it out. And I told them that we could find 48 music groups. And I said, I don't even know where they are. I don't know how to do that. We're going to fail at this because we've never done it before. And I said, remember, I'm one-man band. I've got a part-time secretary. And now you're telling me, in addition to everything else, to go find 48 qualified, vetted music groups and bring them to Dallas, Texas for a week of performing all over the city. He says, you got the freedom to fail, Larry. If it's not 48, they don't care. They just need to have music groups. So if you only get to 40 and it's not 48, they said we need 48, maybe we need 55. It was like, don't worry about the number. Let's see what it's going to take to make this a reality. And so when I sat down and started putting all the pieces together, I'm working on a trip right now to southeastern United States that I'll probably do next spring. And I've been thinking about it for a while, but yesterday I sat down and I said, okay, what are the real implications of making this a reality? Well, there's got to be a dates. There's got to be what I'm going to do. There's got to be mileage between cities. Is it airplane or is it travel by car? Who am I going to see? What am I going to do? I'm used to thinking that way because I can schedule a 2-week trip, but I've got to start now for that to happen in April.
Right.
Because I have the skills of saying, okay, what's it going to take to make it a reality? I didn't wake up April 15th and decide to pull this off on April 25th. I got to think a lot ahead of time. But I think a lot of times the scare factor is I can't do this, so I won't do anything. Or I will step back and let somebody else do it because I'm afraid of it. And I'm just saying failure is only saying that we didn't quite get there. Why didn't we? And how can we? And let's go at it again, but do it a slightly different so that we have a win out of it.
Yeah,
and that is motivated me for years. So that keeps me, to people that says, my grandson who is thinking about doing this nonprofit and launching today, it scares him to death in one respect. It's quite exciting in another.
Oh, yes.
But he said to me, oh, I don't know what to do. I've never done this before. I said, we'll take the steps together. I happen to have been one that's been down that road before, but it's your road. It's not mine. All I can do is coach you on it.
That's right. That's right. But you bring up a good point is preparation and planning. You just don't say, okay, this is what I want to do, and tomorrow I'm going to be successful at it. You've got to prepare for it. You've got to plan for it. You've got to lay out the roadmap, if you will, and have everything set up. And then as you go along, if something's not fitting right or looking right, you need to adjust, tweak, if you will, and do a little perspective. Maybe you need to change your perspective a little bit and see what's out there.
That's right.
I think the one thing I've heard the most this year specifically is you have an idea and it'd be great for everybody. You've got to present it to everybody, but do they want it? Are they ready for it? What is the recipient, the audience, the client, however you want to look at it? What is their perspective on it? And sometimes that can be tough to figure out if you have no idea what their perspective is.
And in this nonprofit that my grandson is starting to work on, I said, your first year is working in your laboratory, figuring out who the other people are that are working on it, where your collaboration is, what's missing. I said, in fact, I've said to him for 2 weeks, remember, it's like giving birth. You're not just playing around, you're creating a new entity to accomplish this. So what are all the implications that you can think of right now that you need to address? And the seriousness of it, too many times we don't take life that serious. In other words, people can decide to get married and never think about the implications of personality adjustments. So they get married and then they, quote, fall out of love because they don't like the person that they married. Well, that could have been discovered with a little bit of work if that was going to be a meaningful connection in the first place. Right. So sometimes we create our own downfall because of our spontaneous reaction to life.
Right.
And so I think there's a need in everybody's case is to understand who they are, what they're good at. I now can tell anybody what I won't do for them. And I don't feel badly about telling them no, because if you're not working in my area of strength, I'm not going to bug you. I'm not going to frustrate myself. We're not going to go that way together because that is not my giftedness, because I now know myself well enough. Now, back in those early days, I was testing things out. I had things in the closet that never became a reality. We would try some things, get them started, they didn't work, put that away. I've had work over the years of my own life that I got a lot of tenacity, so I keep on going back at things. I created 30 years ago a very handy tool called the Personal Stewardship Inventory with a friend of mine that lives in Atlanta, Georgia. And these were tools to help you figure out, how your organization works, where your strengths are, another one helps you decide what success probability is in life and how can you be successful. Another one was about how you use your time, your resources, and your talent, and so forth. We created those things 35 years ago, and they worked really well on paper 35 years ago, and many people really appreciated them. The tools are really good, but we're in a digital age. Mm-hmm. Now, I could have said, well, I'll just put this aside, forget it exists. But for years, I've said there's got to be a digital way to do what we did in the early 80s, because people use their phones and they use their computers, everything else. Well, luckily, right now I'm about ready to release for anybody to use the Personal Stewardship Inventory again. But now it's all digital. It's no longer on paper. That's because of tenacity of how can I repackage this to meet another audience need that was not being met in the 1980s and now exists today. So we've got to always be persistent. That doesn't mean if I didn't do it right, if it was good on paper, it can be good in some other forms. Sometimes we've got to say, I'm going to keep on driving this thing because it's worth it. But there's also sometimes to say, it's time to pack up the suitcase and go home. And I think that's hard on people because they may have had a great idea, right, that I'm not going to pursue. So the freedom to fail has given me options all the time, Ellis. I can just keep on pushing out there because failure to me is not a negative. I don't want to fail. Don't read me as I'm looking forward to it. But when I run into a snag, it's only because there's resistance, there's a conflict, there's a cultural thing. How do I evaluate that circumstance and move on from it? So I'm big into doing that. I also learned that you never do something well by yourself. And so I really believed in developing teams. And then I learned that the value of the team was when you gave the team credit and you stepped out of the way. Now, in the case as an illustration, I wrote the book called Intentional Living and Giving, and years ago, a book called Giving Yourself Away. The content of that book came from teamed collaboration over 6 or 8 months. And every one of us that worked on that together owned what we were coming up with and the understanding from a theological, biblical point of view, what this was all about. In my leadership role, I was started teaching that content. Eventually, I wrote a book on this content, but it wasn't because I'm smart enough to do that. I am forever grateful for that team of 5 or 6 people that we worked together for 6 months to figure out all the pieces. And they owned it. They never thought about that's Larry's product, though this is our product. So I believe even if I'm, managing and working with people, how can I push it to where it's theirs? Because when they own it, they're going to really shine in working on it. If it's all for me, they're just being gut level employees. And I want people to own it. So I believe even in life, the more you can get your grandkids or your kids or your business or whatever it is to own the outcome, where the customer feels good about what you've given them because they own the new windows or they own something and they help make it happen because you gave them permission to make it happen, rather than I'll do this for you and leave you alone. So there is a team spirit that comes from the knowledge that I'm not alone in this world. I'm here to help you succeed, and we're going to succeed together. So I'm a big team. Big one on teams.
Yeah, my magazine, Wisdom on the Front Porch magazine, that was my whole idea going into that it was not my magazine. It was not my product, it was all of the columnists that are there. You know, I've got 5 or 6 columnists that every
Yeah.
issue brings something up. But it was also there for the reader, for the entrepreneur, because it's entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs, helping them reach the goals that they want, whether it's in health or business or spiritual or whatever it is. And to provide, I just wanted that magazine to provide the best information, the most current information, the most useful information, so they could go back again and again and use it and read over it and get what they need to make themselves successful. That was the whole idea behind that. And so I
Well,
deal
in
with
that role, you became a facilitator to other people's dreams and visions. That's what you
yeah,
were. And
yeah,
so you are, yeah, you may be the editor, you may be the one that's got the financial responsibilities. There's a number of things that come along with leadership. But when somebody else says that's my platform or that's my way of expressing myself, then they own it as well. And that's really, so I think success, part of my biblical view is that God gives to you and to me, and he wants us to give to somebody else, and they're gifted and they got the same gift from God, and they're supposed to do the same thing. So if we're doing God to people and people to people, then we're doing stuff together. You
yes,
you cannot work in isolation. And I need the guy that knows how to do the electrical in my house, and he needs me for something else.
right,
And together get my house fixed, and I meet his needs as well because we're doing things together. My whole world of consultation, and I was a consultant for 35 years after serving with the Ministry of Campus Crusade, now known as Cru, and I was there for almost 20 years. But in that experience of working with nonprofits, I always saw over and over again, how do we build teamness to accomplish their goal? Because if you don't build teamness, you're going to stay small and you're going to stay pretty insignificant. And
right,
the risky part is you've got to give yourself to other people and then let them create what God has given to them. And that's a little nerve wracking because they may change a little bit on what you thought was important, but into their audience and so forth. I'm working with one group right now that in the early 40s came with a whole series of phenomenal biblical teaching for kids, 18 booklets. Since they were created in the early 40s, they've never really known what to do with these 18 booklets because they have other things to do. In 2025, I was on a conversation this morning, is we're talking about those 18 booklets that were created 60 years ago. How can we digitize those so that the fathers can teach their children using the phone the principles that are in that excellent, outstanding material? But in that day, it was print and it was visual arts.
right,
Today, it's going to be on the phone, and the child and the father, even if they're not in the same room, can interact together. Now,
right,
it's not prepared that way, but the conversation this morning was, this is phenomenal work. It just needs to be brought to the 2025 period and be ready for the next 25 years. How can we digitize it? And how can we push one button and translate it into 50 languages? Well, we couldn't do that in the 40s and 50s.
no,
Today, technology allows us to push a button almost immediately in any conversation and go from English to Spanish to German to you name it.
oh,
So,
absolutely,
and so what we've got is the opportunity to collaborate again on really good stuff that was really good when it came out, but it doesn't know how to fit into the marketplace of today. That is collaboration and working together. That is seeing how we can take it to the next level and be relevant to a new generation. So there's always opportunities to change and to adjust and to make things happen.
I love
And boy,
that.
it takes a lot of entrepreneurs to even think that way, starting getting creative. And, you know, I sat back thinking, I never would have thought about that. And then somebody that's 30 years of age says, well, we could do X, Y, Z, and it would do this happen over here. And I'm thinking, that's a great idea, but it never came into my mind.
That's right.
It's gonna
Yeah.
to do these things takes a handful of entrepreneurs also partnering, because
Yes.
entrepreneurs are not man bands.
No.
They may start to do well that way. They may work individually better than they work in teams, but they need to realize that there's really a place for teamwork to make it happen.
Oh, there absolutely is, in so many different things, and if we can think about it, we are never alone doing our stuff. Even here, we've got the internet, or we have somebody who is helping, put like my podcast, it goes out to several different places. I didn't do that personally. I have a team that does all of that and puts it out there. Um, and it's not a team that I've picked. I've gone to this specific place and said, this is what I'm after. This is what I'd like to see. Okay, no problem. Let's get it out there for you. And I don't have to know how to do that. I don't have to spend the hours upon hours, getting out there. Like you said, I just load it up, push a button, and there it's all done for me. It's
Well, listen, it allows you to work at your strength. It
yeah.
allows him to work in their strength.
Oh yeah.
When I first retired a decade ago, I thought, boy, I'm going to get here and learn all this technology because I knew it was valuable, and I was going to edit pictures, and I was going to do my websites, and and after about 3 weeks, I thought, this is really stupid, Onan. This is not how it's going to work. And I collaborated, got a guy involved with me. We've been working together about 10 years. Luckily, he can pick up my ideas, and he knows what I want on the front of the curtain. He knows what the audience has got to see, but he's got extreme knowledge of what goes on behind stage.
Right.
And he can sit there and read algorithms on websites and what's happening like I read a good book. And he says, no, we're
Oh,
not going to do it this way because this didn't work in the 48 hours. No, Larry, you're talking about something that worked 2 years ago and it won't work now. We need to be working together because that skill package is not my skill package.
right.
And well, what you're good at expressing concepts. I'm really, really good at making the concepts multiply.
Oh,
So
right.
he's not trying to compete with me. And
No.
we don't compete, we collaborate.
Yeah.
And
That's
that's
it.
what it's all about.
It is.
Another thing I first learned back in those days is while you're doing that whole process, I learned that management by wandering around was the best way to manage people. Not
Oh,
where they came to my office, but where I sat down next to their desk and learned what they were really doing. It did a number of things. Number one, it brought me face to face with my real team, but it also let me see what they had to go through to turn those ideas into reality. And it was them owning it, but it was also me beginning to understand and appreciate what they had to go through. Because I think a lot of times we as entrepreneurial spirits think that all you got to do is go push a few buttons and it's going to happen. 1, 2, 3, 4. How fast can it happen? And you don't realize the circumstances, the environment, the challenges that are before them. And I learned by management, by walking and wandering around, was the best way I got things done. So when I started to learn that, I would spend probably an hour of an 8-hour day in my office environment with people working on many things, just moving from office to office, from desk to desk, having conversation, getting ownership, listening, and listening is far more important than talking in many cases. But I started to go back and say, okay, I understand what's going on over there. So I've got to be doing this to help them be successful, because if I get too tough on what I demand here, I won't get it done and we'll both be frustrated.
right.
So I
Right.
learned a long time ago that management by wandering around is the best way to work with people, and it made life fun because I enjoyed having fun with them.
That's awesome.
They were
See,
working, but they were good timers.
yeah. Yes, and I think when you were there, you understand their thought process too, how they're thinking, what's going on with them. Because sometimes maybe they're just having a bad day and it has nothing to do with work and they're doing their best, but something happens somewhere that's kind of putting a snag in that. So it's like, okay, let's just take a breath. see what we can do to just alleviate what's going on and make progress. The one thing too that I've heard is sometimes you'll have somebody in a job and they're doing okay, but they're not really doing the best that could be done. Not that they aren't doing their best. There's just maybe they just don't have the drive or the motivation. So you find out what they're like and you say, you know what, this person would really be so much better over here. I think they would just be a powerhouse. And so instead of just saying, hey, you're not doing your job, do it or get out of here, it's like, well, let's move them over here. All of a sudden, your business really starts taking off because you found the right person for the right job and they were in your company the whole time. And just moving people around to saying, you know, you're really great at this. You have a lot of good ideas, but I see you really implement those ideas. And we need somebody to do that. You know, would you like to come over and do this part? And what a difference.
Ellis, over the years, there's two particular tools that I've used a lot to help people in that area. One of them is what they call the DISC test, DISC.
Right.
It really helped an individual figure out 4 characteristics and where they fit on just using those. That was really valuable to me because I could start to speak the language of who they were. Because we all think differently. And if I'm trying to deal with a person on a detail and they're not into the detail, won't do any good. The other tool that really helped me a lot, it really came from a personal study I was into, and then eventually I found the tool, but I had to discover who Larry Onan was.
Mhm.
I had to figure out who my strengths were as an individual. Now, I ran across a book years ago called The Truth About You, and it really helped me map out who I was in life and how I acted at 5 years of age has a great deal of how I act at 81 years of age. So
Wow.
because I started to figure me out. But the most valuable tool I found to do that, anybody could go online to Strength Finders. It's put out by the Gallup organization out of Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah,
But
I
if
just
you go
found out
into
about
Strength
this two
Finders,
weeks ago. That's good. Go ahead, because
what
our
it does is it helps me. What blessed me so much there is I identified the 5 strong things that I do really well. Now there's 10 great strengths, but the 5 top ones is where I want to major my focus of life in. That doesn't mean I can't even do the things on the bottom of the scale, but it means that I would be probably happier if I found somebody with strengths that were in my weakness, and then we collaborate. Our collaboration says, I know you do this well, I want you to step in and do this. Now, illustrate it this way: I'm not a numbers person. I've got people that really love numbers,
there you go.
and I can work numbers because I was educated to deal with them, not because I like them.
Right.
So if I have to work on my own personal budget and my own finances and deal with reading spreadsheets and board member budgets and things of that nature, I can do it. But at the end of that hour, my brain is tired. All that's happened is I got tired. Now, if you give me something in my strength, I could do it 24 hours a day and have trouble even going to sleep because I'm so excited about it. So it's not that we cannot perform in a weakness, but don't major your time in doing a weakness. So I say to everybody I work with, you figure out what those top 5 are, and we're going to figure out how you can have a good time on long-term living because you're working the way God created you to be.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to try to get into things that are in your deficiency, and you're going to be frustrated with life over there. So, those 2 tools, the disc test I used years ago, and then I got into Strength Finder. Both of those are 2 tools that really do help you understand yourself. There's a lot of other tools out there. They're complicated in some respects. Some of them I think are kind of deceptive on how they lead you to believe certain things. So I'm very cautious of not putting people into everything that comes along on the road of, quote, take this and you'll be successful. But Strength Finders and the DISC are very, very helpful, insightful tools that says, Now I understand who I am. I really believe that, and the book kind of relates a little bit to this that I wrote, but I believe that none of us own anything. Think
Right.
about it in that context. The world is full of I own it, it's mine, I take it, I run with it. Uh, Even our culture, I have a house, I paid my taxes. In California, you pay twice a year because nobody can afford to pay the taxes once a year. You can do it in installments. State of California says I own a house and I pay taxes to live in my property. I have a car in my garage, an SUV, and I have to pay the license fees and I pay the insurance. That I'm delegated responsibility, but in my brain, I don't own this house. I don't own the clothes in my closet. I don't own my car. I'm a steward that's been entrusted to utilize those tools. I get the benefit of driving and living here, but I'm not the one that owns it ultimately. Because I see from a scriptural point of view, a Bible point of view, that we are stewards and God's entrusted something to us. Every one of us are stewards. The question is, are you going to be a good, effective steward, or are you going to be a lousy, embarrassing steward? The
Right.
question is, you can't get out of the fact that you were created to be a steward. In fact, in the Pentateuch, the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, it says that God came down in the evening and walked relationally with Adam and Eve.
Right.
He wanted to relate to, but he delegated them the responsibility of taking care of a garden. We all talk about the Garden of Eden. Now, the Garden of Eden was the size of at least the state of New Jersey, so it wasn't a small place. I think the gardens we think of times we look at our own backyard and decide what a garden is. This
Right.
was a good size, okay? But when God says, here's this place for you to live, I'm going to put you here. I'm going to have you take care of my stuff. I created everything here for your pleasure and for your benefit. Even go name the animals. Now, when God came and walked with him, he wanted a relationship with his personality, but it was a steward of his. And the word steward means one managing the affairs of somebody else.
Mhm.
So when I realize that I'm a steward, then I need to ask myself, I need to fully understand that. What does it really mean? And how can I be good at that? And then how do I practically live life as a steward if that's what I am? So my whole orientation, whether it's in the business sector or personal sector, I wake up every morning saying, okay, it's all yours. What do I do with it? How am I supposed to act today? Oh, I got a podcast today. I've got to steward the 1 hour with who I'm going to be a guest on. Oh, I've got to call my grandson about a new venture. I've got to go mow my lawn. The grass still grows on my property. So that's stewarding everything. And when you steward it, you're even more careful how you take care of your clothes. You hang them up because it's your responsibility to care for them. If you got an animal, you got to feed the crazy thing and you got to water it and you got to love it because that's stewarding, but you're not the animal. You're just entrusted to take care of that little pup or that little cat. So I think everybody can start to say, oh, I'm a steward. Now, how do I make this really work? And then if the better you get to familiar with the principles behind that, the more successful you are in being a steward. So, although it took me a while before I got to fully understand that, my job was fundraising in the organization I was with, and I've been a fund development consultant for 35 years. But since I started to learn this, I've told people over and over again, there is no such thing as a donor to an organization. A donor is a person that gets a needle in the arm, extracts blood, and you give them a sugar cube or a cookie and says, come back in 3 weeks and give more. It hurts a little bit. I want to see people become partners, and a partner does just this.
Right.
We join hands together, and we're taking our strengths together, and we are creating something together. So it's stewards working together as partners that make things happen. And my job is maybe to deliver to where they understand it. Their job may be to give to it. maybe they can bring their expertise into play. On this phone call I had this morning, one guy said, well, I'm specialist in XYZ. I can easily do that. I had no clue he had the expertise to even think that way until he just tipped his hat and said that. I thought, we may have the expertise in 4 people on a Zoom call to do something that we thought was impossible. Now, he may not have all the skills, but I'm sure not cramping his style by saying, I'll think about that some more. And I'm thinking, I'm glad you are, because I gave you all the thoughts I got. I don't have any more to give you. But I've got certain skill packages when we partner, we're always equals.
Nice.
In the nonprofit sector, they're always trying to get donors to give money. And they use enticements to do that. So an enticement is, if you send money, I'll send you a gift, and here's a t-shirt, or here's a blanket. Or if you'll give me $500 or $1,000, I'll set you up to play golf with XYZ Pro. That's all exchange. It's almost manipulation. I'm trying to get you enticed enough that you'll give me money so that I'll give you something. But that's a hard animal to ride, because you've always got to be figuring out what to give them again.
Right.
Partners need that. Partners can be thanked with a gift, but partners own the vision of what you're talking about. So if you want your employee to own it, you've got to get them to feel this way, not just doing something for you. It's where he's contributing to changing a radical thing. I think the old story of the mason that was working on a great cathedral, all he was doing was laying bricks. And so the guy came by and he says, I see you're a good bricklayer. What are you doing? He says, I'm not laying bricks. I'm building a cathedral. Now, it was a task that had to be done, but he saw himself working on the end result.
There you go.
And I think sometimes we don't let people get into the end result. We need to help them get there. But if you don't know what stewardship's all about yourself, how can you help somebody else become a good steward?
Absolutely.
And so I'm big on helping you become all that God wanted you to be. And there's principles behind it to make you successful. And it's transformational experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how do people get in contact with you, Larry?
Well, if they want to just get into the book or my blogs and stuff, they can go to larryonan.com. It's just my name, but the only difference is I got an apostrophe in my name. It looks Irish, but in the world of cyberspace, they don't like characters. So take out the apostrophe, just type in larryonan.com. Now, if they're over there and if somebody wants to connect with me, I'm within the next week, probably by the time anybody would see this show, I'm going to have that personal stewardship inventory as a free thing for anybody to take. And they can ask themselves, how am I doing in my stewardship as a life liver? And that will let them just take in 15 questions. You'll get a score on it. You'll even get some suggestions on what to do next. And I also would download a good portion of the book so you can get into the principles. I think it's understanding principles that's there. That's one way. If you write to me at larryonan.com, I try to answer any email that comes to me. I'm open, but I want to stay focused on the objective. So yes, I'm open to anybody that wants to become a good steward. But it's larryonan.com. Now, the book, if they wanted to get the book, they can go any place that they like to buy books. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million. If you've got a favorite bookstore you work with, they can all get the book. So your book is as close as how you order your next book for Kindle or whatever it is.
Okay, and that's
but
the
it's
intentional living
intentional
and
living.
giving.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's the intentional living and giving book you're speaking of, correct?
Yeah. And I blog there, as I archive podcasts that I'm on there, so people can always come back and look at stuff like that. There's a lot of things that are there. That's the easiest way to connect with me. And but more so than that, I just want people to know who they are, that they were fearfully and wonderfully made, and they're not here by accident. If you start to understand that core principle and you really want to get to know the Creator, then help them know the creator. Some people don't like the God stuff, but I'm saying, look at, you're talking about the guy that created you. So let's get to know a little bit more about who he is, because that's going to be a benefit to you. And then let's dive in and become all you can be with who you are. Because if you're working in your strengths today, it's gonna help you move from just static existence to thriving. I call it from survival to thriving. And there's no reason for people to be just struggling in a survival mode. If you made mistakes in life, learn from those mistakes. Every curve is going to teach you something else, and every curve is going to lead you to a new insight. So curves and mistakes, they're not really mistakes. They're probably a lot of the parts that you have to go through to learn.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a better person because of the hiccups in life. Much better.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I was speaking with Eric Hollenbeck, and he says he wouldn't change anything in his life, even all of the crappy things that happened in his life, because it's all part of who made him who he is today. And that's an absolutely wonderful thing. And it's kind of hard to hear that at first, because sometimes we don't like those horrible things that happened. And we don't want them to have made us where we are today, but you're stronger today. You are who you are. Your value is because you went through it and you came out on the other side, because you're here right now. And so it's as tough as it is to think that those things are part of you and you'd like to forget them, forget the bad things that happened, take the good that came from it and where you are today and be grateful. And gratefulness goes a long ways.
The bumps in life are what make people get fired. People go through divorces. There's death in the family. 10 years ago, my wife died of a glioblastoma brain tumor. I'm a better person for any of those experiences. So I don't even look at her death and her change of address as I think of it. That's all she did, is changed addresses on me. But I became a stronger person as a result of living through that downside of the pain. Right. And when I started to realize that was part of molding me for my future, I'm glad where she's at, and I'm glad that I'm doing what I'm doing. But we can get so stuck sometimes in these past failures that we do not realize that that was the very thing that we needed to realize what we were supposed to be doing in the future.
Yeah.
It molds us and prepares us. So any upset in life is only there to help prepare you for something else. And
Absolutely.
It's coming. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, thank you so much, Larry, for being here on my porch, and thank you, our audience, for being here on my front porch too. So enjoy you. I'm glad you're a part of this. I'm glad you were able to be here. If you like this episode, be sure and share it with others, and take a look at our website, wisdomonthefrontporch.com, and we'll see you next time here on my front porch.
Thank you very much. It's been a joy.
Thank you, my front porch friends and neighbors, for pulling up a chair with me and my guest today on Wisdom on the Front Porch. Now, if you've got value from this conversation, would you do me a favor? Leave a quick review, then share it with someone you know who could use some inspiration. It helps more friends find their seat on the porch. And hey, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss what's next. Until then, keep the porch light on for new wisdom every time you show up. Your seat's always here for you on the porch.